name is Curt DeBerg, and this is the second video in a series of videos that I'm calling Modern Day Hemingway. This particular video takes you on our journey to Petoskey, Michigan, and the surrounding cities or towns like Point City, Charlevoix. And we will start here by hitting the next slide here. I went to Petoskey on July 31 and August 2, and accompanying me was Modern Day Hemingway. And what I mean by that is I'm pretending that Ernest Hemingway is sitting on my shoulder today in 2019, accompanying me on this journey where he's able to look at the places he lived and fished and hunted, and looking at what it looks like today, because he's amazed at how things have changed. Also, part of my book that I hope to write on Modern Day Hemingway will look at Ernest's 6 demons that I've identified. And his first demon in part 1 of the book is his mother, and to a lesser extent his father, because he had a very contentious relationship with both of them, especially his mother. So, Modern Day Hemingway, are you ready? Let's head north to Petoskey. And we have a cell phone now where we can GPS this and take us right to Petoskey. And I have to say, Modern Day Hemingway was pretty impressed with that. And here we have a view of Lake Michigan today from downtown Petoskey. And oh my gosh, what a beautiful little city. But I'm telling you, it's hard to get a hotel room at the end of July because it is the peak of tourist season. The Hotel Perry is a lovely, lovely old hotel built in 1899, and you can see it's built in 1899, and 17 years later, when Ernest was 16 years old, 16, maybe 17, he slept at the Perry, and he was charged 75 cents for this. When I inquired on July 31, 2019, the rate was $360. And there's how it looked in the old days in 1899, and it was a beautiful hotel, but $360 was a little steep for me. Here's a picture of the Hemingway statue that was recently built and installed in downtown Petoskey, and it's a beautiful statue of Hemingway leaving for Toronto in 1920 with his briefcase of manuscripts that he's writing and submitting to magazines like Collier's. In his pocket, he actually had a bottle in the picture that was a model for this, but for the actual model, they put a notebook in here to probably make it more amenable to the kids. Here's a picture of me standing next to the statue, and I want to give a shout out here to Mr. Robert Jensen. He conceived of the idea for the statue, and he funded it. So thank you, Mr. Jensen, for honoring Hemingway in Petoskey. We then went to the Cityside Bar, I think it's called, but at that bar is the Annex. And the Annex, during Prohibition, they couldn't sell alcohol, but they certainly enjoyed it illegally from the tunnels underneath the bar. And Ernest is reported to have played billiards and watched bare-knuckle boxing. And Modern Day Hemingway, he can tell me if that's true or not. But supposedly, he used the inspiration for A Man of the World, one of his short stories. Part of that was the saloon here in Petoskey. And there's a picture of Hemingway in the bar today, overlooking the bar. That's how it used to look. And here is a picture of yours truly at the bar, at the second chair, which supposedly is Hemingway's chair, but it really wasn't because they didn't even have chairs at the bar then. From the statue, looking across the beautiful shrubs and the trees and the flowers, we see City Park Grill, which is, and the Annex picture was right here at the entrance to City Park Grill. And now we're going to take a look at Ernest having fun with his backpack and all of his camping gear. And he jumped on a train there, pretending he was a hobo. And what's in his hand here? I can't tell exactly what that is. It looks like a walking stick, but I don't think it's a gun, although Ernest loved guns. Here's a picture of Ernest as a very young man, and I got that young man, he was 7 or 8 there. And this picture came from George Colburn's office. And George is a member of the Hemingway Society, and he also is a documentarian. And he did a documentary in 2018 called The Young Hemingway and the Garden of Eden. I think that was the title, but it was The Young Hemingway in any respect, and the movie length, or the documentary length, is actually 100 minutes. I've seen the video and it is outstanding. That afternoon, Modern Day Hemingway and I drove to Horton General Store, and take a look at that beautiful little store. Horton General Store. It's got 2 bedrooms and a living area upstairs, and downstairs they have a restaurant of fine dining, and of course I had a beer, I had a nice meal, and then I had some, looks like pecan pie for dessert, making me hungry right now. I stayed at one of the 2 bedrooms, and I'll show you the bedroom actually in just a moment. Next to the general store is the Red Fox Inn, and Mr. Fox supposedly taught Ernest how to fish there. And behind the store, back here, behind the store, is where Ernest and Hadley got married, because sitting on that property at that time was a little church. And here's a little reminder to the Red Fox Inn tourists that Hemingway actually came here frequently. Young Ernest was taught to fish by Bolly Fox. He gave the Foxes a World War I helmet in 1919, and he cited Fox's house in one of his short stories, Up in Michigan being the famous one, and it was the Paris version in 1923 of Up in Michigan where he mentioned the store. A moment ago I told you about the beautiful bedroom, $125, not $360, and thank you George, and thank you Chip, the proprietor and owner of the store. In the store is a picture of young Ernest. He's one of these 2 boys, and they're hauling lumber by a 2-horse-drawn load-bearing wagon, and they are being guided here on the side by an adult, and these 2 boys are riding the rail, and this is a rail taking the lumber to the bay. And now what's next? Here's a picture today of Walloon Lake, and we'll see in a moment. Walloon Lake is where the Hemingway spent every summer since 1898, and then the family built the cabin in 1898. Ernest was born in 1899, July 21 of 1899, and 3 months later he made his first trip with his parents and Marceline to Windermere Cabin, which was on the west arm of the lake, right about here. Grace's cottage was on the other side of the lake, about a mile across, where they called a farm Longfield Farm. They built Grace's cottage there in 1919, I think it was. It could have been 1920, but it was right about that time where Grace had a cottage built, and Ernest later said that Grace used all of his college money to build the cabin, which was not true, because Ernest had no intention of going to college. He wanted to be a writer. Grace's cottage was the getaway from the family, and here's where Grace could do her painting. She also learned how to make furniture. She was a very, very talented woman, and she was always hungering for new knowledge. But her main talent, as we know, was music. She was a opera singer. Ernest often went to the Horton General Store, which was about over here, a couple miles from Longfield Farm. Let's look at the next slide. Here's a picture of Windermere Cabin back in 1902, it looks, because Ernest looks like he's 2 years old, maybe 3. If he's 3 years old here, this would have been in 1903. Marceline being a year and a half older, they're both dressed in overalls there. So Grace didn't always dress the children as girls, or as they look like twins here. She dressed them as twins, but she would often dress them as boys at the cabin. But when they got back to Oak Park, where they spent the rest of the year, and oh my God, what a beautiful home that is, she would often dress Ernest as a girl to look exactly like Marceline, so they could be mistaken as twins. And Ernest would go up north each summer for 3 months, and he would literally go wild up there, and hence the song Gone Wild by Robin Lee Berry, in tribute to Ernest getting away from Oak Park and up to Walloon Lake. And here's Walloon Lake. You have the north arm, you have the south arm, and you have the left arm as though it's a body. So the south arm would be the body of the lake, and then you have the north arm and the left or west arm. The cabin Windermere was probably right about here, and you would swing on over to Longfield Farm, about a mile over by boat, and then another mile or two up the road would be the Horton General Store, just to give you a little idea where we were. Here's a picture of Ernest as he looks maybe 15 years old. Marceline could be 15 or 16 there. You have Ursula, otherwise known as Ura, and you know Ursula, that's the boat right there, Ursula of Windermere. Every boat had a name of one of the daughters. Here's a picture of Sunny, her real name is Madeline. A picture of Carol, the next youngest sister, and baby Lester, who was a baby when Ernest was 16. So it looks like Ernest was 16 there because there's 16 years difference between the two boys. Here's pictures of Horton's Creek today. Ernest fished this. He camped in the woods near the Horton's Bay. Here's Horton's Creek today, just as lovely as it used to be. This is part of the Horton Creek. It's part of Lake Charlevoix watershed. Beautiful, beautiful part of Michigan. Here is Petoskey, the train stop. The train would actually come from where the passengers were dropped at Harbor Springs, a few miles across the bay from Petoskey. To get to Windermere, they had to take another train, the family, and then a boat taxi. In closing, I want to introduce you to Curt DeBerg. He's the president of the Michigan Hemingway Society, and his very kind and gentlemanly partner, Mr. Stan Tyluki. His business partner is Stan. Here's Chris. They own Arlington Jewelers, and behind them is a picture of Hemingway, a portrait caricature. I love that caricature, by the way. And in closing this 12.5-minute video or 13-minute video, I want to pay tribute here to Hemingway as a young man, and I ask you and invite you to join me on my next stop as I chase Hemingway's next two demons, which would be his betrayal of his 4 wives and his betrayal of his literary friends. I'll see you in Paris. I'm leaving in 2 days. I'll be there on August 27, 2019. And so, au revoir.